Well, welcome to season 2 of the Love Means Business podcast, where we explore how love, leadership, and lessons learned collide to create powerful change. So it's really love, learning, and leveling up, those three things. And in our first season, we really peeled back the layers on love's impact, the good, the bad, the complicated, the not so beautiful, all of the different phases, right? But this season, we're taking things a little bit further. We're shifting the lens towards what happens after the pain just a little bit more than we did in season 1. When you've reclaimed your power, you've redefined success, and started using your story more as a strategy. It's really like propelled you into that next phase or what it is that you were meant to do. Because love doesn't just shape who we are in our relationships, in our personal lives, it shapes how we lead, how we build, and how we show up in business and in life. So I'm your host, Emily Green, and this season is all about transformation, leadership, and the beautiful, sometimes messy process, it is messy sometimes, of turning heartbreak into higher purpose. I could not think of a better guest to launch season 2 and all that it is going to represent than Dr. Emily Wheeler. She's executive director of Dress for Success Charlotte, and a woman whose personal strength and professional leadership are a living example of what it means when love truly means business. So thank you for being my season 2 opening guest. I'm so excited to have you on.
So happy to be here, Emily. I always love spending time with you and talking with you.
I know, I can't wait to dive right in. A little intro to who you are to introduce you to the audience. So Dr. Wheeler is a forward-thinking organizational change leader with a deep passion for adult learning, equitable practices. Did I say that right? Is it equitable or equitable?
Equitable, typically.
Equitable. Obviously, I'm great at pronouncing words and workforce development. She's known for creating collaborative spaces where people can grow, lead, and thrive. And she's built a career on empowering women to do just that. Anything else you want to add to your bio here before we jump in?
I mean, I think the other piece I would add is I'm a mom and wife, and, in addition to the work that I do that's really meaningful to me, being a woman in those roles is also really important to who I am.
Yeah. So we're going to structure your interview kind of in 2 parts. And the first part is where I really want to dig deep into your personal journey. And I feel so thankful that you shared that with me in, private conversations, and how you really survived and have thrived, and how you used a lot of these hard things you've been through to really motivate you and kind of propel you forward. So you shared that before stepping into this leadership chapter of your life, you went through an incredibly difficult and painful season. Can you share a little bit about that chapter, what life looked like for you then, and what ultimately became that turning point for you to make a big change?
So I grew up in a safe and stable household and had so much privilege and support and so many resources that were part of my daily life that I never really would have thought or expected that I would be in a situation where I was in an abusive relationship. And honestly, it took me a very long time to even recognize that that's where I was. So when I was in my early 20s, I had finished my bachelor's degree. I went to grad school. I got my master's degree. I was well educated. I moved from my home state where I had grown up to Florida, which was halfway across the country for me. And so I was, in this time where I was asserting my independence, and I felt like I was on track in all the ways that I had expected for myself at that point in my life. And when I moved from Iowa to Florida, my, at the time, kind of college and grad school boyfriend had moved with me. And so we were, cohabitating for the first time and establishing ourselves in a new state. And I think that it was the physical distance and separation from the people in my life that had been a long-term support that really started to isolate me and put me in a space where it was hard for me to see on the inside that things were not healthy.
Yeah.
And so, looking back now, I can see all of the pink flags that turned into red flags that at the time I tried to explain away. And, when you love somebody, it is really complicated to accept that there is harm that's happening too.
Right.
And so I, was in that space where I thought I had what I wanted, and all of a sudden, what I had didn't feel safe and like it was right for me anymore. And I wish that, I mean, the moment, that aha moment came from a place of trauma and, kind of having a catalytic event that happened that made me realize that if I stayed where I was, things were going to get worse. And that really my only option for myself was to leave. And so that was a really hard chapter, and now it's easier for me to make sense of it. At the time, I was embarrassed. I felt so much shame. I felt like I had done something wrong or that there were things wrong with me, which was why I was in that situation. I thought that I shouldn't be somebody who was there, and so I didn't share with people what was happening. I didn't talk about it. I really internalized it, and I shut that side of me down. And so I wasn't I mean, it took me until I was in my 30s and went to therapy for my therapist to be like, Emily, that was an abusive
Yeah.
relationship, and we need to talk about what that looked like. And so I think that while there was this catalytic moment, for me, it was still really hard for me to accept that like the life that I was moving into was not the life that I had expected for myself or the path that I had been on. And so I think that first step was really taking a step to believe in myself and to believe that things would be okay, even if they were different than what I thought they would be. And now, in hindsight, my life is so much bigger and fuller and richer and safer. I am in a much better place, but I didn't know that at the time that I would get to where I am now.
So you talked about isolation, and I wanted to pull that a little bit more out because I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're in the midst of these abusive, toxic type situations, you may not realize your world starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think that, at least for me, that was
Yes.
also part of why I struggled identifying that I needed to leave. And I also felt like I couldn't because I didn't know who would actually help me. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Were there specific
Yeah.
things that happened that were used to make you more isolated?
Sure. I mean, the big one that I didn't realize at the time was financial. I was working in higher education. I was making very little money. We were living together, and he was in a financial field where his income was significantly more than mine. And so a part of it was living together, sharing space.
Mm-hmm.
He was providing for most things in our combined day to day life. And while I was still a very independent person, like my salary wasn't going to afford for me to be able to just step out independently without a lot of planning and
Right.
worry. And even when I did decide that I needed to leave, I had a really hard time finding a place to live that I could afford. And actually ended up renting a room from somebody on Craigslist, which again, now in hindsight, not a great
Yeah.
idea.
That could have been another story altogether right there. Like, I've
It
seen
worked out
movies
well.
about that.
She was lovely. It was the early 2000s. We're in a different place.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think the financial piece is a significant piece of the isolation when I was dependent on him. And even when I did leave, also, I mean, I took as little as I could because I didn't have a place to go. When I reached back out, probably a couple months later, I had asked to come back and take some other furniture items, things my parents had given us, and was told no. And was also put in that situation where, like, I felt like I had to fight for what was mine. And most of it, I just gave up. I just decided it wasn't worth it. But the emotional toll of kind of walking
Yeah.
away from what you have in some capacities. I think the other for me is this is what I've worked a lot with my therapist around is there was some physical harm in some moments of not even moments. There was physical threat, but most of the abuse in that relationship was emotional and
Hmm.
psychological. And I think those are the other isolating pieces where there was so much subtle messaging about my unworthiness, like buying me workout clothes to motivate me to lose weight, which, inherently telling me I'm not enough and that I need to change my body to meet somebody else's expectations, and a lot of infidelity concerns and things like that. But they all came back on me, like I was crazy, I was making things up, I wasn't
Yeah.
trusting like I
Hmm.
should be. And so that emotional manipulation is really what I think was incredibly hard for me to
Yeah.
see as isolation, but then also to rebuild because that really tore down how I understood myself to be, and took a lot of time to kind of work through. Something that was really powerful to me when I started going to therapy that has helped me kind of redefine this. I mean, even using the word abuse for me has been hard in the past when I talk about
I
the
understand
relationship.
that. I can understand that for sure.
But my therapist, we had a conversation early on about psychological and physical abuse has the same impact on our bodies. And so then when we respond to situations after we've experienced some sort of trauma, it is the same response, regardless of the type, if it's our physical selves or our mental selves that are feeling that stress. And I think that's been something that that has kind of helped me somehow to recognize like I am a whole person and all of those pieces of me don't have to be individually defined, like they are a collective. But then it also means my healing is collective, and working on myself in one way, physically, emotionally, is helping strengthen the other piece of me as I kind of grow past that time in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that is a great like natural transition to my next question for you. And I really want to focus on, how you reclaimed your self-worth. So in relationships like the one that you experienced, identity and confidence are often stripped away little by little, which you kind of went into, and it's crazy before you know it. It's like, where did my self-worth go?
Yeah.
How did you begin to rebuild your sense of self once you made that decision to step away?
I really wish I had like a magic answer for you of like,
There's
do this.
probably no magic
I
answer. I
know.
mean, that's
I
hard.
know.
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm going to start with this moment that I had, and then I will talk a little bit more about that question. But when I was in this kind of existential point of what am I going to do? Like, I recognize that this is probably not a relationship I should be in, but I don't know how to make a change. I spiraled in that for, it felt like forever. I'm sure it probably wasn't as long as it feels, but I was driving in my car and I was listening to a Sarah Bareilles album and literal CD because, the early
In the
2000s.
day, throwback.
And the song Uncharted came on, and I had listened to it 1,000 times. And something about those lyrics on that day, and being in the car by myself, I literally had this. I just started crying, and I said out loud to myself, like, I deserve better. I deserve better than this.
Yeah.
And I think that was that moment that I needed to say, okay, I don't know what's ahead. I don't know.
Right.
It's going to be scary to step into something different and to take a risk and know, like, I can't afford to carve this life on my
Yeah.
own in this new state where I don't have a support
Right.
network. But I recognized I was worth it and I needed it. And so I think that was a really defining moment for me. But then I think the other piece is I had been not sharing with people the reality of my relationship. And when I recognized that it was time for me to do something different, I called my mom and I said, I need help. And that's not something I've ever been really great at, of asking for help and being vulnerable. And I called my sister and I told a friend at work and I started talking to the people in my life. I called another friend that I was a friend, but was not somebody that I necessarily would have thought even a couple months before that to go to in a time of crisis. And I said, I need a place to stay. Can I come stay with you for a few weeks? And so I started to be vulnerable and ask the people who I thought would be there for me, even if we hadn't gone through something like that together. And every
Hmm.
time the answer was yes. And I think that just that love and acceptance from people in my community in this new city that I had lived in for about a year, like, I think that made a huge difference. And then it was from there, it was finding how to stand on my own 2 feet. And it took a long time. I did
Yeah.
eventually move into an apartment by myself, which felt really empowering.
Yeah.
And, I had some job opportunities and growth that helped me feel like the confidence that and the capability that I knew I had, that I was able to utilize that and start to feel validated in that. But I mean, I think it's still something that I am continuing to rebuild. I don't think there will ever be a time where I fully,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I have moved through that trauma, but I think it's still a part of me. And so I think that self-development and growth will always be happening because I don't want to get back to that place where
Right.
I was. And so I think inherently I have to keep growing and building that confidence to work against that.
I think it's great also that you shared, even though you felt isolated and all of that, ultimately there were all these people that you asked for help and they did help you. Because I think that's one of those like lies in some ways we either tell ourselves or are told to us
Yes.
by people
Yes.
that are controlling us that like no one's
Yes.
going to help you or there's
Yes.
nowhere to turn.
Yes.
And I had the same thing with my situation where, I had friends that helped me. Some of my family helped me. So it's like, but it's scary. It's scary because
Yeah.
like, what if they
Yeah.
don't? But then again, like, what if you don't ask and then you're still stuck in that
Yeah.
situation? So don't let the people controlling you make you think that no one else will help you. And even if you
Yes.
believe that, still it's scary, but still at least ask for help. There's usually going to be a lot of people that will want to help you.
And it's also, I recognize how fortunate I was that I could call. I mean, I know that to your point, there is always somebody who will say yes. And I'm
Yeah.
really fortunate that those were friends, those were family members, those were
Hmm.
people that I had. And I know we'll talk more about the work that I do, but
Yeah.
supporting women who are going through their own crises. The only difference between myself and another woman that we work with is that I had resources that I could
Right.
turn to in that time of crisis. And if I didn't, it may have been very different and even more difficult choices about if I don't have
Yeah.
a safe place to stay. Do I stay in this environment or do I go somewhere and seek shelter through a community service
Right.
or resource?
Right.
And those are even more difficult decisions to navigate. And so again, in hindsight, I'm really grateful about the resources and support that I did have.
Thank you for sharing that part. I
Yeah,
want to move into kind of the next
sure.
section. Part two, where we really get into your leadership evolution. And this is really where the meaning of the, name of the podcast, where love means business,
Yeah,
we really get into it's important we share what you've been through, but like what you do now makes perfect sense given your history and also what you're so passionate about it. So
yeah.
fast forward to today, you're leading
Hmm.
Dress for Success Charlotte, which is an organization that's really dedicated to helping women achieve economic independence, helping them, get back on their feet, being that source of support really for a lot of people. How did your personal journey influence your decision to take on this role?
It's really funny because I don't think that I ever saw this coming. Even as I have grown in my career and been working to heal myself and build a stronger self, I don't, if you had have asked me even 5 years ago what my career would look like, I don't think I ever would have been able to say, like,
Yeah.
it would have taken the path that it did. And I share all of that because I think that this was the work I was meant to do.
Yeah.
It's more about now that I am in this role, I look back and I'm able to see every single experience I had that brought me here and how it helped me be informed and compassionate and fierce as hell in terms of advocating for this community and hopefully relatable and caring about the women that we serve. And so I don't know that it was a decision as much as this really obvious opportunity. When I read this job description, I literally took it to my husband on my phone and I was like, this is my job. I read
Like,
this.
I'm too in
Like,
for this.
read this position description because it just felt like all of the pieces of me and all of the work that I had done in one
Yeah.
role. And then to have the fortune, the opportunity to step into something that I'm so deeply
Right.
passionate about has just been something I never could have guessed.
Yeah. So this podcast really is about intersection of love and business, and I love to kind of blend those lines because I think it is really blended, especially when you are doing work that you're just so passionate about. How would you say love shows up in your leadership today, and like how you manage, you mentor, make decisions?
My leadership philosophy is that we are whole people who do our best work when we can bring our whole selves into spaces. And so, I think that that aligns really well with nonprofit work. We are not an organization that has to be compartmentalized or, we're just focusing on business. To me, our business is people. And if we don't feel like we can bring our staff, our volunteers, our board, don't feel like they can bring their whole selves into our space and have that authenticity, then I don't think we're really serving women in the community in the ways that we can and should be. And so to me, love and business have to be integrated. And intertwined, because I think that when we can bring love and compassion to the work that we're doing, it makes our organization stronger and it enhances the ways that we can serve women in our community. But I think to me specifically in terms of leading a team and an organization, that looks like owning mistakes. And I am the first one to say, hey, I messed up. Here's what happened.
Yeah.
Here was my intent, but I recognize impact was very different and I want to own that. How can I do this differently next time? It also means that I try and make space for and hear our staff to understand what their needs are, what's going well, what's not, what personal things are happening that I can support them with. And so I think all of those, it's really people centered. But then, especially in thinking about decision making, our clients drive what we are doing. And so putting clients at the center helps make sure that we are on the right track. And that means making sure we know what are our client stories, what are the victories, what
Right.
are the challenges we're seeing, how are we supporting women in the many nuanced conversations and needs and challenges that they're going through, and making sure that those are always at the forefront. And so sometimes the love in business makes it heavy and hard, and
Hmm.
this feeling of like, will we ever be able to do enough? But then we get that success and that victory and that tearful moment of joy in celebrating a client, and that shows that it's always worth the heart to get to those
Yeah.
positive moments.
So, with everything you've been through with your personal experience, do you ever see that reflected in the women and stories that come through Dress for Success? And is there maybe one in particular that comes to mind, or several? But yeah, is
Sure.
there anything that comes to mind with that?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many connections between the women who come through our doors and the stories that they share, and everything from a client who drove up and had a very nice car, and the assumption that people could make on the outside would be one that you know she's affluent, she has her needs
Yeah.
met, she's in this great place. And she came and shared, like, I left a relationship and I have nothing. I have the clothes on my back and I have the car that I drive, and that is all that I have right now. And that's a really personal moment for me, of
Yeah.
feeling that same strain of like trying to fight for things that I had that I decided weren't worth it. And even that, for me, I could reach out to my former partner. This woman was not. And so there are so many stories. But I think the other piece of it is, the women, the staff at Dress for Success Charlotte, our board members, our volunteers, every person, not all women, some men as well, who engage with our organization have some personal connection to this mission
Yeah.
and this work. And those powerful moments where we can have totally different backgrounds and experiences, but that man walks through our door and says, I was raised by a single mother. Here are all the ways that I watched her make sure I had what I needed.
Hmm.
And so here's how I want to give back. And even in those, we can find that connection and that shared experience. And so I think it's more about, it's not a story or two. Like, that is the connecting thread between every single person that
Yeah.
supports Dress for Success Charlotte and the women that we serve.
So, thank you for sharing all that. And I can only imagine, like, also the feeling that you probably get because of what you've been through. Not to put words into your mouth, but I feel like it would feel so empowering and almost therapeutic every time you help a woman that reminds you of your story. I mean, that's, gosh, how does that feel? Like, what does that make you feel?
It makes me feel everything: joy and celebration and support and love for the woman as she is navigating, whatever those needs are. But then it also, I mean, there are days that I get in my car and I cry on the way home, because it
Yeah.
also, you feel that moment, you feel that need, and it is deeply personal. And so I think that's what makes me good at my work, and being able to advocate for women in our community and really express the need for stable living wage jobs specifically for women. And I wish I could, like, give her housing and meet all of her needs and make sure her kids have what they
Yeah.
need for school, and whatever, pay her medical bills, and we can only help her in some of those steps. But it's the respect and the joy and the dignity for the woman who has said, I need to change things, and I am so committed to making a shift in my life and being able to be people that she trusts and be there for her in that shift, that's what's so powerful and something that every day is wakes me up and makes me want to come and do this work.
That's amazing. So you have such a strong background in workforce development and you've just done a lot, in that realm. How do you blend this empathy that you have, all this you've been through and the feelings? How do you blend that with strategy with your leadership? And especially when you're helping other people rise up, you're helping them overcome these things. Are there specific things that you do, or maybe even people you work with do, that you feel like are exceptional at blending that empathy and strategy?
Well, to me, I think strategy can be seen as this big picture, bold leadership, big changes. And, I'm not trying to say that strategy is always wiping the slate clean and doing something different, but I think that it is often seen as kind of top down. Like, here's the strategy, here's where we're going, figure it out. And, my approach is much more collaborative. And so I would say, like, to me, empathy enhances strategy and equity enhances strategy. So sure, I might be thinking like, here's where I think we should be going and what I'm seeing in terms of our client needs or community needs. But then I'm working with our staff to say, okay, what are clients sharing? How do we know what those needs are? Who do we have relationships with? Here's where I'm thinking we're heading. And then we build that together, but also thinking about what are the needs of each of the people on our team and the clients we serve. Because to me, if we have one strategy that's going to only serve one group or is only informed by one perspective, then that's not empathy and that's not equity. When we're advocating for women with all different backgrounds, experiences, needs, lived experiences, we have to be thinking about equity too. And so I'm really collaborative in that. But I will also say sometimes that is a challenge for me too. I can overthink and over collaborate and can slow down some strategy. And so sometimes it's also, I can get really in my head and really like wanting to find the right answer, especially if there are multiple needs or conflicting needs. And sometimes I just have to like stop and be like, okay, we have to make a decision. We have to move forward. We have to, advance and have to kind of pull myself out of my head. And that's where I think really trusting my team and our staff
Yeah,
to help point me in the right direction is really valuable.
that makes sense. I mean, I think it's balance with all of that is it changes, it shifts each
Does.
day too, and depends on the situation and all of that. But I can definitely relate to the overthinking part too. I'm sure a lot of our people watching, listening will.
Like such a strength sometimes of I love to get information and learn and, be really thoughtful. And sometimes that thoughtful is too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. So when you think about the people that you serve, what's one message you want them to carry with them about rebuilding, rising, and thriving, no matter where they're starting from?
The first thing I would say is you are enough and you are powerful and trust yourself. And so I think those were messages that I didn't have internally at the time that I was going through change, and I have found them again. Sometimes just hearing like you are enough is really important when you're feeling like you're not, or when you're feeling like there is something wrong that's being put on your shoulders when your intuition says it's not your responsibility. But then that second thing I said of trust yourself, looking back again, I had all of these times that I just felt like this isn't right. Something's off. Something is, I'm not trusting and I'm sensing, and there was a reason for that. And I worked so hard to quiet that voice in myself, and because somebody else was telling me to.
Right,
And now in hindsight I'm like, that's my intuition telling me
right.
something is in fact wrong. And I don't know that I would have learned that lesson sooner, but now that I know that, that is a voice that I hear and I listen to. And so trust yourself. You are telling yourself something for a reason, and that reason may be really hard, but it still is important to listen.
Yes. Sometimes the voices in our head are good. Sometimes they're not too
Yes,
many. But
yes.
yeah,
We can
sometimes we
have
need
our
to
own
listen
best
to
interest
them.
in mind, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. That's funny. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you more?
Sure. I would love for you to check out our website, charlotte.dressforsuccess.org, learn more about who we are and our mission, because I mean, I hope that comes across, but this work is so meaningful and so important, and we need more advocates in our community. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Emily Jensen Wheeler, or my contact information is also on our Dress for Success Charlotte website. So you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to schedule coffee or a call and get to know folks as well.
Thank you so much. Your
Yes.
story, it's such a powerful reminder that leadership doesn't just come from titles, it comes from transformation. And hopefully, everyone got that from all of this amazing information. You've shown us what it looks like to take pain and really turn that into purpose, to lead with empathy, and to use love not as weakness, but as a strategy for growth. Thank you for being part of the first episode of season 2. And
Yes.
for reminding all of us that when love means business, the result isn't just success, it's significance. To our listeners, if you love this episode, if you're watching as well, but love this episode, make sure you subscribe, share it with someone who needs a reminder that their story still matters. And check out Dress for Success Charlotte, learn more about their mission. And until next time, keep loving, learning, and leveling up, because your story is your greatest strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.